This is the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo.
Hello everybody and welcome to today's Blood Red podcast, where there was plenty to get through, plenty to talk about the Reds. The Southampton win, of course, and all the standout moments and big talking points from it, including the keeper, Sadio Mane, and how brilliant he's been recently and throughout the year. VAR, of course, after the weekend's events involving Man City. Philippe Coutinho, there's been news on his future today, we'll look into that and plenty more. I'm Sean Bradbury, your host today, and with me are two veterans. I'm going to use the word veterans, experienced operatives of the football game.
I think I prefer experienced operatives.
That's okay.
Skilled
That's okay.
experienced operatives.
Skilled,
legendary operatives, do you think, Dan?
I think you're pushing
legendary operatives.
Greats rather than legends.
Yeah.
But, you're obviously both well on the way. You heard there, Ian Doyle and Dan Kay, gents. How are we doing? Doyle, you recovered from Saturday?
Not really, no. I'm a bit tired. I'm sure Dan's the same. Yeah. Not that I'm complaining too much, but it is a long way to Istanbul and then Southampton. Yeah.
I think all the way to Asia and then the south coast.
Yeah.
We could all really have done with a nice, cushy home game on Sunday possibly.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of Monday Night Football, even on Monday. I mean, on one serious note, it went for us this weekend. But if we hadn't got the result at the weekend, I would have been a bit surprised that Klopp and the club didn't push. Bearing in mind the date of the Super Cup was set in stone, having to travel so far. Basically, everyone I've spoken to who went to Istanbul and went to Southampton feels like they've been pulled through a hedge backwards, including that. And I'm very under the weather the last couple of days, hopefully on the mend now. And of course, there's no better tonic than 3 points.
Well, absolutely. And that's where we'll start. Doyle, in your verdict on the game at the weekend, you were talking about how this could be a title race decided by the finest of margins. And that was kind of not quite how the game was decided on Saturday, but if things are going to continue in this vein, that was pretty vital. The Reds got the job done. It
was just like the end of last season, wasn't it? It was yet another narrow squeak. I mean, there was quite a lot of them in the last couple of months. I think Liverpool, even at this early stage of the season, they knew that was a massive game for the reasons that Dan's just mentioned. I think they only got back into Merseyside at 7 o'clock on Thursday evening, and then they were setting off for Southampton within 24 hours. I mean, I think I worked it out with something less than 70 hours between picking up that Super Cup and walking out at St Mary's, which, for the fans, it was difficult enough. And I know the players get obviously slightly better travel, slightly better treatment, but they're the ones that are running around and having to, face that 120 minutes in Istanbul and then another 90 plus on the south coast. So it was a big win. Was it a great performance? First half, not really. Wasn't anywhere near as bad as they were in the first half against Chelsea, though, where I thought they were not great at all. But second half, once they got the goal just on half time, great time for it. They played some good stuff actually, but obviously, then I'm sure we'll touch on it a bit later. Adrian makes his mistake, which, to be fair, had been coming a little bit. He got away with one in the first half, and then it becomes all unnecessarily tense. And suddenly, the tiredness, which they hadn't really shown any of in the second half, suddenly it starts to weigh on the mind a little bit, and they're struggling to clear the lines. And if Danny Ings puts in that chance for 2-2, I don't think anybody would have complained too much. It's interesting because at the start of the game, if you'd have said Liverpool draw, it'd have gone decent result. After 44 minutes, Liverpool draw, you said that's definitely a decent result, But then after 82 and a half minutes before Adrian does that, he's just gone, that would have been a complete nightmare for them. But they got away with it. There's an awful lot of work still to be done. But the bottom line is, I think Jurgen Klopp always thought that these first couple of weeks with playing for 2 trophies against very intense teams where they weren't really able to. I'm not saying they put out a reserve team, but they had to go for it fairly hell for leather. They were never going to be games where they were allowed to take the foot off the gas a little bit. Maybe there was a little bit of that against Norwich in the second half, which became obvious with the standard of performance, but they were 4-0 up at that time, so fair enough. But they weren't allowed to do that against Southampton. So to get a trophy and a win at the end of this week was about as good as it could have got.
Dan, I think your post-match Twitter verdict said this is an impressive win as we'll have all season, which I think in the circumstances is a fair comment. But what did you make of it all on Saturday?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, that's kind of paraphrasing one of our Echo columnists. I think it was Andrew Beasley, who I seem to remember a tweet from him when I was actually in the stadium in Istanbul, possibly when it went to extra time on Wednesday, going, if Liverpool win on Saturday, it will be one of the best results to get this season. And at the time, it struck a chord, and it just kind of popped into my mind at the final whistle. I mean, I always thought it was going to be one of those games that we would just have to dog it out and just scrape a result as best we could. Remembering what a very difficult match it was for us there last April, which I think was one of the real key matches in the running when those 2 late goals from Salah and Henderson got us a 3-1 win. And really the first half lived up to all expectations. And I think we were all looking at the clock in the build-up to half-time thinking if we just get in at 0-0, we'll all be made up with that. Then up pops Sadio Mane with another moment of magic, and and instead of being lucky to go in level at the break, you're ecstatic to go in 1-up. After the break, it was a totally different story, and really Liverpool should have been 3 or 4 goals clear before Southampton got back into the game, and that to me was a real, I'd say, the most encouraging part of Saturday. That kind of the energy, the strength, the quality that they showed in probably the first 25-30 minutes of that second half. They never really gave Southampton a sniff, and like I say, should have been really 3, 4, 5 goals clear, which would have made Adrian's silly mistake rather moot. Sadly it didn't, but they showed, apart from that one moment when Ings got in and really should have scored, an ability again to manage difficult passages of play when you've just got to grind it out, a tricky 7 minutes plus stoppage time, get it over the line. And thankfully, I think they were given 2 days off, weren't they?
Yeah.
I read somewhere, so they weren't even coming back into training until tomorrow. And hopefully by the time they take the field against Arsenal at 5:30 on Saturday, they will be rather more refreshed and rejuvenated than and that goes for the crowd as well. Certainly the ones that trekked out there in the week. Everyone will be feeling a lot sharper and fresher, hopefully, by Saturday tea time for what's now become a top of the table clash.
Absolutely. Well, before we get on to the bad and the ugly of Saturday, let's start with the very, very good, which was Sadio Mane, as Dan's briefly mentioned. Doyle, I think he's got, I read before, 15 Premier League goals in 2019, which is more than anyone else in the calendar year so far. And obviously there's several Ballon d'Or contenders in the Liverpool squad, and Van Dijk's pretty much nailed on, it seems, to lift it. But how important is Mane to this Liverpool team now? He's just
you'd have to say Mane's up there, because he wins a penalty in the Champions League final, wins the Champions League, gets to the African Cup of Nations final, top scorer in the tournament, I believe, just off the top of my head. Pretty sure that's right. And there's only Aguero who scored more Premier League goals this calendar year. I mean, Mane's got, I think, is it 8 more than any other, or something like that. He's got an awful lot more than any other Liverpool player this year. He has become the kind of the go-to guy. And it's not just been last season. I mean, I take it back to the goal he scored at Burnley in New Year's Day 2018, because I think he'd been, was he dropped for the Everton game, or was he rested? Remember, he didn't pass. He didn't pass. Yeah,
and a really poor game there. The crowd on his back a bit. I think he's starting to struggle a bit here. Yeah. But you're right, that Burnley goal really kicked him on.
Yeah, and since then, he scored in the Champions League final that year. So that's when Real Madrid were interested in him. Obviously, he ended up staying. He did the same again this summer. He just got his head down. He just carried on where he's left off. I mean, he's a player that's going to be interesting a little bit further down the line inside the next couple of weeks, because he only had about 2.5 weeks off.
Yeah.
And both him and Salah and Firmino, they are going to be rotated in and out of this Liverpool team. I mean, this was the first game out of the 4 this year that they've all started together up front. But yeah, Mane's the one who it's funny, isn't it? Because Salah, he started the season very, very well, I thought. Looked sharp in the first couple of games that he played. And I'm not saying he was off it on Saturday, but he was probably the lesser of the 3 of them. Firmino, second half, very good. But Mane, even in the first half, he wasn't particularly great. But that wasn't necessarily his fault. But then once he scores that goal, it explodes. I mean, he obviously set up the second one for Firmino, and he had the header, which was a good save from Gunn. I think it was a header, wasn't it? A header from certainly had an effort.
Oh yeah, he did. Yeah,
He was.
Yeah.
Was it a header?
I
think it was a header. Yeah. And then he put the back heel in for Robertson, which if that had gone in, that would have been goal of the season there and then. Which I think you're going to want to make a big deal of that.
We'll come back to that. He's very much on the agenda.
Yeah. So Mane, he's the man in form in terms of the Ballon d'Or. He should be, but he won't be. He won't be. I don't think he's quite got the cool factor, the kind of profile is the better way of putting it, that Van Dijk's got. Although Van Dijk did do a very nice piece of skill during the game. Even at the time, I was like, that's good. Yeah, I like that. I like that. Just over his own head, inside infield to Milner, who just carries on. Yeah. Just. I mean, there wasn't enough of that in the first half in Liverpool. Or rather, there was too much of it. There was too much of that kind of slack play defensively. They were trying to play it out from the back. Didn't really work all the time. That was what was odd about the second half. Southampton then, for the most of the second half, didn't bother pressing Liverpool. And you saw what happened with the goal that they scored. That they got the rewards from that, but maybe they were a bit wary of being played around, because Liverpool do have the players that can do it. Like I saw somebody else, I can't remember who it was debating the fact that, why are we doing this? But I don't know what team it was. Say it was Everton, for example. I'm not sure it was, but why are we trying to play it out from the back when we haven't got the players to do it? But most teams are trying to do that now, but they're right, not every team has the players to do it. Liverpool have, and if they can make these spaces in behind that front line and give them a bit more room in midfield, and that'll be the way it goes. But it's early days for that. But going back to your original question about Mane, he should be in the running for the Ballon d'Or, yeah.
On Mane then, Dan, he's always been, ever since he came in, a significant player. It was clear, as soon as he signed for Liverpool and he, started having an end product and an effect straight away on the team. But then this year, like we've said, he just seems to have kind of found another level. I think for me, he was always a bit streaky, a little bit of a purple patch player, albeit a very, very good one. But then from kind of the first kick of New Year and even the start of the season, but now he seems to have just kind of found the consistency in his game, and every week he seems to be scoring goals at the minute.
It seems like he's almost thrived off the fact that the likes of Mo Salah has come in 12 months after what he did, and maybe taking some of the attention and the burden in terms of being the main goal scorer away from him. Because if you remember that first season, he came in, had a great start first half of the season, went to the African nations in January 2017, and the wheels kind of fell off a little bit. Yeah. Everyone was desperate for him to come back. He did. I think he scored 2 against Tottenham in his first game back, early February 17, and then was kicking us on, and then got injured again just at the start of April and missed the last 6 weeks of the season. We just staggered over the line and got fourth and got into the Champions League. Then Salah's come in, and obviously, for a brief period of time, it was the Fab Four, wasn't it? Where Coutinho was there, and then that became the
tremendous
fantastic three, or whichever way you want to put it. Every time I look at him play, I just think, God, not that when I play, I'm a defender, because I'm not, but I just think he must be an absolute nightmare to play against. He's so quick, he's so strong, he's got football intelligence, I think, in terms of his movement, his positioning. He's always if he never gives defenders a moment's peace. And like I say, to me, he seems to be thriving off the fact that arguably Salah and Firmino are the more high-profile figures of that front three. But in my mind, I can't differentiate between them in terms of their importance to the team. Mane is as important as anyone, but also as well, I think it's his. He's a real team player. A few people made the point in the build-up to Saturday's game. One of his biggest contributions last season, or most important contributions, that game back in April when we ended up winning 3-1, but it was such a scrap, it was such a battle, and that brilliant goal from the length of the pitch run that Mo Salah scored to make it 2-1 with 10 minutes to go. Really, that came about because of a crunching tackle he won on the edge of his own box, Mane. Henderson played an intelligent header into space and Salah street clear. So he's not one of these that's just going to hang around the edge of the opponent's penalty area waiting to score a glory goal. He's an absolute grafter, and I think you can see from everything his teammates come out with, everything the manager comes out with, that they value him so highly. He's an absolute intrinsic part of Liverpool's success over the last 2 years or so, and I think he's the one with the least amount of time left on his contract. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, well, he's the one who signed most recently.
Is he?
Yeah, he signed in November last year, so I'd imagine they're kind of all roughly the same.
Rubbish there, but never mind. Well, I'm delighted to hear that because obviously there has been talk of a move to Real Madrid. He wasn't in it, around about a year or so ago. He was kind of playing his cards a bit close to his chest and wasn't exactly booting it into touch. I mean, listen, I'm not naive enough to think that this amazing front three are going to play up front for Liverpool until the end of time. But you look at them, you look how young they are, how hungry they are. And I'm sure I'm not alone in hoping that we've still got a lot more to look forward to from these three in a red shirt for some time to come. Yeah.
I think the other thing about Mane is that, referring to that second season when he was there, is that he moved position, didn't he? Yeah. He was on the right and then he moved to the left. So maybe it took him a little while to get used to it. Now you can't think of him as being anything other than a left winger. Yeah. Although he has obviously played. Did
he play in the middle on Wednesday in Istanbul? In the first half, anyway.
Yeah, he played down the centre, but then it was only when he switched off to the left. I mean, he's had a couple of games where he did well down the centre. Watford he scored twice, didn't he, with the back heel and stuff like that. But then against Everton, wasn't magnificent, but then quite a lot of the players around him were first choice. So that was a game where Liverpool just had to get through it, I think.
You got me thinking there when you were saying about the three of them and the importance. This is obviously, in many ways, a daft question, but PSG come to Liverpool and say, £300 million, we just want one of those three. Which one do you think you would give away? Who's the? They're all so important, aren't they? I mean, look at Firmino's impact from the bench.
Who would you give away?
As in, if you had to
say your head, you had to lose one of them.
Okay, right. Well, not Firmino, so he's staying.
Yeah,
right. So it's between the other two.
Salah and Mane. It's so hard.
It's a difficult one. I think Sorry, I think I'd still get rid of Mane if I had to. If the choice was you have to sell one of them right now.
It's difficult, isn't it?
That's what I'd do.
I don't know. I think it's an awful choice. It's Hobson's choice. It's like being shot. Being asked if you want to be shot or hung, because there's two of the best players.
I didn't want to go down that road.
Two of the best players I've ever seen in a Liverpool shirt, and I'd be devastated to lose either one. But I think, guns to my head, maybe I would choose to opt to get rid of Mo Salah ahead of Mane. Just because I kind of get the impression that Salah not thinks he's too big for Liverpool, thinks he's too good for Liverpool, because generally his humility is a very key characteristic that he seems to have. But I don't know. I just feel that Mane just gives us a little bit more. I love Mo. His speed, his intelligence, is just the threat he brings when you can see how much opposing teams fear him. But I just think Mane's maybe slightly more of a team player.
Do you not think that's the reason Mane gets all that space, though, is partly because Salah's often double marked?
Every chance. The reality is, lose either one of them, we are poor for.
Yeah, and you get other teams attacking down the other side, don't you? There's a bit more space.
Who are you buying with that 300 million then?
Mbappe, isn't it? Straight, yeah.
Here we go. Let's just end that right now. That's just completely and utterly made up, hypothetical, and is not going to happen.
Yeah,
okay.
Indeed. Well, we'll move on. We'll move on to bigger and better things, which is Adrian. A bit of a carrier-style howler at the weekend. There's no two ways about it. Doyle,
bit of an Alisson style.
Well, I guess this is the point, isn't it? I mean, when
it's a bit carriers though, isn't it? Because he's trying to play the ball through the defender,
yeah. But then, as you say, Doyle,
you can't play straight through people. People are not transparent.
Well,
an ambitious nutmeg from the keeper. But Alisson has made similar errors last season. A similar time in the season as well, pretty early on, and the team recovered. Got away with it essentially. Same again on Saturday. Do you think it's? Obviously, he's going to be around between the sticks for a few weeks, you would think. Adrian still to come now. Is it a concern for you, or do you think he'll just learn?
There's going to be 3 or 4 other goalkeepers this season who make exactly the same mistake. And Adrian just has to make sure that it's not him again, basically. Yeah. I mean, even if he only plays another, 6 or 7 games, I don't know how many we're just guessing there, but he's certainly going to be playing on Saturday. So I'm sure if the ball comes to him and Aubameyang's a little bit quicker than Ings and he's chased him down, I don't think he's going to be thinking, I'm going to try and do something clever here. He'll be put into his mind, hang on, Anfield here scores whatever the score is, it's a massive game, everyone's watching. I'm just going to absolutely launch this one, which is what I think he'll do. Alisson learned from that mistake. You remember when he did his little flick over Brighton, wasn't it, over somebody, and it was great, and it kind of made him popular with the crowd, but maybe not so much with Klopp in his heart or whatever. But he learned from his mistake at Leicester, and keepers make mistakes. That's the thing. Alisson made one against Lyon, didn't he? Just the other week, and they got away with that. They won. He made one against United, got away with that. They won. I'm sure he's made another one somewhere on the lines. But the point being, they got away with it because the rest of his team helped him out. And with Adrian, he made a very good save from Yoshida on Saturday. He made a very good save from Matip, which was actually good defending by the pair of them, because Matip had to get there and he kind of put his trust in his keeper to deal with this when he was getting in the way of it. So, and he had that first half, Ward-Prowse blocked one from him when he tried to clear it. So Southampton clearly knew it was a tactic they could exploit, which they did successfully. You have to argue, because they got a goal out of it out of nothing. But I think the keeper, he did okay overall. I mean, I did the ratings. I gave him a 6. Simply on the strength of, he was going to be a 7 if he hadn't made that mistake. And it's he's not a 5. It's a mistake and it's not led to a defeat. So, I think if it's Gini Wijnaldum spoke after the game and he said, look, goalkeepers make mistakes. And when they make mistakes, it's often a goal. It's not like midfielders who've got the defence and the keeper to then bail them out. Keeper makes a mistake. It's one of those. And he said it's about not so much the mistake, but it's about how you react to it. And it's going to be about how Adrian reacts to it in his first start, in a home game, Anfield crowd. It's up to the crowd now. Do we regard him as the guy who made the mistake at Southampton, or the guy who helped win us the Super Cup? I think they'll be thinking he's the guy who helped win us the Super Cup. So
absolutely. I think that's the key, isn't it, Dan? He's still in credit from what has been quite a busy first week or so at Anfield for him.
Well, he must still be pinching himself. A couple of weeks ago, 15 days ago, was it? When Liverpool played the Charity Shield. And at that point, everyone was assuming that Simon Mignolet was going to be Liverpool's number 2 goalkeeper for the season. within 24 hours, it seemed, Adrian was the name everyone was talking about, so obviously they had that lined up pretty quickly. And then obviously, 4 days later, Alisson's calf goes ping against Norwich, and all of a sudden he's thrust into the spotlight of playing in a cup final and what's likely to be 3, 4, 5 Premier League games. So, he's a decent, steady Premier League keeper. Sometimes these things can almost actually serve a purpose in that they just act as a little reminder that, particularly out after the jubilation of Istanbul for the lad. I think Klopp said it himself. I don't think he's won too many. Probably the first.
Yeah, it would have been the
medal
first
of his professional career. So he wouldn't be human if he wasn't still a little bit head in the clouds from that. He was given certainly a rude awakening in those last few minutes at St Mary's, and that heart-stopping moment when the ball came in from the right-hand side and Danny Ings got there first, and you're just waiting for the rest of the ground to go up, aren't you? And when the ball flashed wide of the far post, we all breathed a sigh of relief, which no one more so, I'm sure, than Adrian himself. I think it might just do him a little bit of a favour that kind of like, right, you've had your glory moments, you've had your little scare moments. Saturday evening against Arsenal, it's right down to business, brass tacks, no messing about. When in doubt, like Doyle says, if you got the likes of Aubameyang or any of Arsenal's pretty impressive looking front people bearing down on him, now is not the time to be faffing around and making any silly mistakes. And hopefully he'll learn from that. And for the rest of his duration in between the sticks for Liverpool, which nothing against that, we obviously hope it's not going to be too long, because Alisson's already proved himself to be a fantastic goalkeeper, one of the best in Europe. He'll be wanting to make sure that he does nothing further to blot his copybook, and I think he'll be right on it on Saturday to make sure that's the case.
Don't forget he had an injury as well after being slid tackled by a fan in Istanbul, which was just...
What is it with keepers and injuries? A lot of their injuries always seem to be stained and bizarre. Freak
injuries. Odegaard on the ironing board.
Yeah. What was it? Dave Besant and the salad cream. Yeah. I'd buy that album.
Richard Wright and the do not train on the pitch.
And he fell out his loft.
Yeah.
I was at that game. Yeah. And he fell out of his loft as well, didn't he? Richard Wright.
Did he?
Yeah,
he's had two of them.
Yeah, he's had two.
One could be described as unfortunate twice.
He's got to be more careful. Anyone else? Any more strange goalkeeping?
Any more? There must be more.
Did Grobbelaar have anything? He's bound to have done something slightly...
Tommy Smith missed the 78 European Cup final, didn't he? Because he dropped... Was it like he dropped a spade on his foot doing the garden? Something like that. But obviously he wasn't a goalkeeper. We'll get back to you on that one.
Yeah. Any more? Send them in to us. Final point then, and as promised earlier, final point on the game. The goal that could have been. I got a little bit excited on Saturday night when I saw that for the first time. I put on Twitter what a goal that would have been after Trent switches it to Robertson. Robertson, I think, heads it onto Mane. Little back heel back into his path as he bursts into the area and absolutely creams it, connects with it so well. Didn't hit the post, did I think?
No, the keeper saved. Great save by the keeper.
It was a really good save. It was really travelling. And then I thought there was maybe 2 other contenders in recent history that could have been the best goal that almost was. But over to you guys.
I know you're going to say Luis Suarez. See, Luis Suarez is one of my 3 best moments in the Premier League from the past 10 years. Not necessarily to do with Liverpool. There's that one. There was, I think we've mentioned. I think I've mentioned this before on the podcast. There's that one. There was the pass from David Silva to Dzeko at Old Trafford when Man City won 6-1 and he chests it down and he turns and he puts it through.
Yeah.
And then the other one was the last minute of Everton against Arsenal a couple of years ago, where Petr Cech ended up behind Tim Howard in the Everton goal because Arsenal put everybody up, and then Everton legged it down the other end to try and score in front of it in an empty net and missed. So it was those 3 things. So yeah, Robertson's shot, that you're right, it's one of those, the great goal that never was. At the time, you think it was because there was a time, I'm going to mention before, you mentioned about Liverpool bossed the second half. There was a spell where it seemed like Liverpool had the ball for about 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Southampton couldn't get it off them, and that's when Liverpool are at the best, when they are pressing the team. Because this wasn't like passing around the back. This was almost all of that play was in the Southampton half.
They couldn't get out at all.
Yeah, they were creating chances. They kept on coming back to them. That was Liverpool at the best, pressing high and all of that stuff, and creating the chances. Which, they got the 1 goal in that spell through Firmino, but if that Robertson one goes in.
Yeah, if we'd scored 3 or 4 in that spell, I really don't think Southampton could have had many complaints, because we were just... and that's really, I think, something I would hope Klopp will be hammering home, that when spells like that come in games this season, you've really got to capitalise and take advantage and put games away, because we might not be so lucky next time. And as we I saw a tweet off one lad I know, getting back on the coach on Saturday, said something like, heavy these title races in April, in August, rather. And it is, but that's already what it feels like. The kind of like,
it was like that last season.
There is no margin for error. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's bonkers that in the second game of the season, but that is the reality of it. Now, obviously, City dropped points against Tottenham in the end on Saturday evening, but we can't really afford to pass up any opportunities to put teams to bed. And I think just that little bit of ruthlessness is the one thing that you'd say that this Liverpool team really could capitalise on. I've got a couple of greatest goals that nearly were. One for the granddads like me and Ian first.
Now.
Well, we're both over 40, Ian, come on. These were actually two disallowed goals. Chris Lawler in the 1965 European Cup semi against Inter Milan. Slalom goal that was outrageously chalked off, but we probably would have made much of a difference anyway, because Mr. Menderbill was always...
How many years is this now? 54 years since
I'm not bitter. Even though I was 12 years away from being born, I'm still not bitter. We wouldn't have gone through anyway because the corrupt Spanish referee that... basically bought the second leg for Inter Milan. It's all well documented, by the way, in case anyone wants to sue me. And the 74 FA Cup final, Alec Lindsay, great 0-0 at the time, fantastic goal. Wrongly disallowed because the ball bounced off a Newcastle player back to him. Thankfully, the Reds went on to win. And a more recent one that just sprung to mind just then, Bernard Diomed's overhead kick against
Sunderland.
I was convinced that day he was going to be the new Ruud Gullit with his dreadlocks and everything. I think we only drew 1-1, didn't we?
Yeah.
Kevin Phillips put them in front, but he looked the business that day. I mean, it was an overhead kick, and I was convinced. I was at the main stand towards the Annie Road end. It was one of them where if there was goal line technology, it might have been given. It was the goalie kind of scrambled it off the line. There was an issue: is it in or is it not? Anyway, if you're listening, Bernard, we'll always have that moment.
I sat next to him on a plane once. Yeah. He just didn't say a word to me. He had his headphones on.
Still thinking about that goal, wasn't he?
He was, yeah. Jamie Carragher against QPR.
The bar, it's got to be there, isn't it? Fowler as well, when you've mentioned overheads there.
Fowler against Birmingham, his first game back,
Was that disallowed?
Yeah. It was disallowed. It would have been a stoppage time winner. It was 1-1 as well.
Yeah.
There's another Jordan Ibe. If he scores against Everton rather than he hit the post, didn't he? One of the 0-0s. And if he scores that, he could have a completely different career. Probably not but
well, you never know. Well, there you go. There's a decent little list of goals there. Right, we've done the good, we've done the bad. We'll move on to the ugly, and I need my stats for the ugly. Defensive shakiness. Every single game Liverpool have played this season, they've conceded at least one goal. And I had a look on who scored before. 14 shots against in terms of shots that Southampton had at the weekend. Chelsea had 20 in the Super Cup.
The game did go on longer, to be fair.
Well, yeah, true. Yeah. Norwich had 12. City, bizarrely, had 8. So that was the least, and therefore arguably the best performance defensively. But then what do you both think are the reasons behind this? Is it just a case of players finding fitness, finding form? Is it Alisson missing? Is it rotation? Because obviously the back line's chopped and changed a little bit. Essentially, do you have long-term worries? Dan, start with you.
I wouldn't say I've got any real long-term worries. I mean, the first point I'd make is that the Don back five, Alisson, Alexander-Arnold, Van Dijk, Matip, Robertson haven't really played together yet this season because obviously they all came back from pre-season at different times. A few people have made the point that kind of, you look at this stage last season, we weren't completely watertight. Certainly not the same rock-solid defence that that kicked into place from kind of autumn, winter onwards. And I think the reason for that is very obvious. Why it takes time to build up that togetherness, that understanding of when you move out, when you move across, just that kind of that fine tuning. It's not going to happen overnight. And anyone expecting Liverpool, to not concede a chance, not concede a goal, it's not going to happen. Also, I think the point needs to be made as well. There's a lot of good players that we're coming up against, and good players are allowed to play well and produce good bits of play sometimes. And even the best defenders in the world will occasionally get caught out by a really slick, sharp, clever piece of attacking play. So, there's been the odd little shaky moment thus far. I mean, I do think part of it as well is that the team as a whole is still very much a work in progress and finding its feet. So if the midfield isn't quite right and the protection the defence is getting from the midfield isn't quite right, then they're going to be a little bit more pressure themselves. So I think that's why, I can't remember the exact numbers, but I did see a stat that, I think in the Super Cup, a certain number of balls were played in behind. Well, that's going to happen when the midfield is still kind of finding its feet and hasn't entirely got its bearings. So, obviously, I'll be expecting an improvement for Saturday because I think Arsenal is probably the sternest test yet in terms of how. I think I read the other day. I think I read after the game at the weekend. Arsenal have won their first 2 games for the first time in 10 years.
Yeah,
really. Yeah,
so that's right.
So they will be up for Saturday. And there's no real pressure on them either, is there? Do you know what I mean? They're away from home. Liverpool are European champions, title contenders. Most people will be going expecting Arsenal to get beat. So they will come and have a go at us on Saturday, and we will need to be improved defensively on what we were in the last couple of games, but I think we will be. They'll have had a rest. They'll have had a full, proper week's preparation at Melwood under proper training conditions, and I think we'll see a Liverpool defensive performance much more in line with what we have come to expect of late.
Well, this will be the most preparation they've had for any game since the Champions League final, which they had about 15 years preparation for that one, or at least it felt like it when we were filling all those days of stuff like, when's the game? It's not for another 2 weeks. Oh, no. There are a couple of strands, I agree with Dan. It isn't just the defence, it's the midfield, I think, is not quite right at the moment. I think there's a bit of a leftover from the end of last season where obviously Jordan Henderson switched position, went a bit more attacking, and I think they're kind of still in that vein, but the difference there is that teams towards the end of last season were fighting for something, whether it's to stay up or to get a Champions League place, or whether to get a Europa League place. So there was something on the line for most of these teams. But at the moment, everybody's level playing field, so nobody wants to give too much away. And I think that's kind of playing it against Liverpool a little bit. I mean, 1 or 2 individuals aren't quite at the level. I think I've said this before, but Trent did a bit better at the weekend, but he's not quite at what he was. Matip the same. Robertson did better again on Saturday. He wasn't great against Chelsea. So there is a little bit of that. The keeper situation as well. Keepers, it's going to affect them. I mean, it's not so much that look, Alisson's gone, but here's a keeper who we'd never even played a lot. Haven't even trained alongside for barely 2 weeks. So they'll get a good week of that, presuming he's not had any hangover from his ankle injury at the weekend. So, as Dan said, they played Chelsea and Man City, who are both good attacking, so they are going to create chances. That is the worry, is the type of chances that they're conceding. It's through balls and crosses, which are they're the 2 ways that teams like to score goals, so it should be... Certainly the through balls is the interesting one, because that's something that the defence never really got done with that last season. I think Chelsea away, I think there was a couple. Hazard, he had a couple. That's Hazard though, isn't it? That's the way Chelsea like to play, which is, it's almost like when Pulisic puts that ball through for Giroud, it's like Liverpool thought Pulisic was Hazard. They were all kind of grouping around him and left that space for Giroud to run into. Bit different against Southampton. Most of their chances came from crosses from their right and Liverpool's left, which is unusual because a lot of the chances Liverpool have conceded, and I've been banging on about this all the way through the summer, has been down the Liverpool's right flank. Whether that's because Trent's not been quite at his level, whether that's because the midfield haven't been covering enough, whether it's because the player in front of him, whether it's Salah, or it would only been Salah for the last couple of games, has not been covering as well. Trent's been a little bit exposed, but we've spoken before on this podcast about the way to get to Liverpool is behind the fullbacks, and I think they've just thought, well, Trent's the more likely one to expose or to capitalise on, and I think they've tried to do that with a little bit of reward, you'd have to say, this season. But I think that's something Jurgen Klopp will know, something they'll be looking at. And as Dan said, there's a full week now before this game against Arsenal. Arsenal will have shown the hand a little bit because they've played 2 games now, so you'll kind of know how their new system's going to be working. So Liverpool will look at that, and I would imagine Liverpool to perhaps tactically change things a bit more than Arsenal at the weekend.
I'm happy with that. I think you've reassured me, preparing a little bit there.
Okay. When it's 3-3 at half time, we'll
revisit it then. Right, try and reassure me about this then. VAR.
I can't. We could be here all day. I'm not going to be able to reassure you about that.
Well, we'll try and keep it brief. I think the Sterling offside one against West Ham, I think everyone was up in arms. Well, to a certain extent, some of our fans on social media, we did a piece about that. I kind of thought, well, that's a binary decision. Surely that's kind of what it's an extension of enforcing a rule that already exists. But then let's park that one. But this one now at the weekend, which obviously denied City there, what looked for all the world like a late winner against Spurs at the Etihad to make it 3-2. Laporte are judged to have handballed in the build up to Jesus' goal. What did you both think of this? Is Is it a daft rule that VAR is now enforcing very well?
Well, obviously we were at the game, so we didn't see it. I didn't see it until later on. In fact, I didn't even see it till last night, if I'm being honest, right? And I saw it and went, it's clearly handball. I didn't think it's... At the time, you would have thought, why has that been disallowed? But when you actually saw the replay, and obviously in your mind, you know you're looking for it, but it hits his hand. And the rule is, for any attacking team to score a goal, if it's any use of the hand, it's automatically disallowed. That's the new rule. It's different for conceding a penalty. I think there's other... Just because it hits your hand doesn't mean it's always going to be a penalty, which I think that's also fair enough. So I think if that happens in the 56th minute, nobody complains as much. But it's because of when the goal is and the context of the fact it happened to City against Tottenham in injury time.
4 months after.
Yeah, exactly, and exactly the same situation at the same end. Yeah. So I think it's funny, isn't it? Because I thought City actually, to be honest, their reaction after the game was like, oh, well, it's the rule. What can we do about it? They didn't really... Okay, I know Pep did a little bit, right? But
De
Bruyne was like, yeah, it's the rule. What can we do about it? And I think City aren't going to be the only team that's on the receiving end of that. And I think this comes down to, obviously, no, we went there, but the fans in the stadium would have celebrated that goal. And I don't know whether they showed replays up on the big screen at City. I don't know whether they do that there. But if they didn't, then the goal gets disallowed. Unless they properly explain what's happened. I don't know whether that happened because we haven't had the situation yet in Liverpool's game where any of the... There's been a massive VAR decision that's needed to be made. So, well, apart from the penalty that should have not been given against Chelsea, but there was probably other reasons for that not being given. But yeah, I think, I'm not a fan of VAR. I do worry that it could... You saw the Women's World Cup, if you watched any of that at points it was just like ruining some of the games, which could have been quite good. And I know that the Premier League of, what was it, minimum interference, maximum benefit or something like that. They've set the bar very high in terms of something's got to have gone really wrong for them to check something. I mean, they check all the goals. Yeah. You know that, which is why that one took a little while. But I think it is because of the situation, the teams involved, the time of the goal. That's why there's been such a big hoo-ha, because let's face it, also it's a great story, isn't it? Oh. It's a great story. Yeah. It's the first time City haven't won a Premier League game since January. Yeah. They've won 16 home games in a row in all competitions. Yeah.
Insane record.
But, I mean, I've written a piece, I think it's just gone online now, where Liverpool fans were going, ha, that's quite funny. Two things to that. One, Liverpool will at some point be on the receiving end of something like that. And two, City had 30 shots against Tottenham. Tottenham, who were Champions League finalists and who one of the best teams that came to Anfield last season and would have finished third if they not got to the Champions League final, because clearly they were towards the end of the season. They were obviously the minds were on the final. 30 shots. Tottenham only had 3 and scored twice. I mean, what was going on with the first goal that Tottenham scored? By the way, that was just weird. It's like he just ran forward. He ran forward and then passed it in the middle of the goal. That was kind of an odd goal, and then header from a corner can happen. I think City were unlucky in the sense that they didn't win the game by not taking all of their chances on the strength, on the the balance of play, but they weren't unlucky over VAR because that's a black and white decision. It's handball. What was your initial reaction, Dan? Was it like, great, City have been denied a goal, or was it...
we were watching it. The few of us had on our coach had iPads and phones, so we were following the game, and obviously there was the inevitable groans of jammy what's-its when this 90-second goal flashed into the net, and then gradually just kind of like various WhatsApp groups, you see notifications coming through, someone going, hang on, wait a second. And so obviously it did cause quite a bit of hilarity and some punching in the air and a few chants of Liverpool top of the league when it became clear that the goal was to be disallowed and City would not get 3 points after all. But, as Ian says, you can absolutely guarantee that there will come a point in this season sooner or later when Liverpool are on the wrong end of it and will be the butt of the jokes and everyone else will be laughing. That is par for the course, unfortunately. I'm not a fan of VAR. I do have this concern that, like a lot of people share, that it's going to take a lot of the spontaneity and emotion out of the game. That being said, if it's going to get more decisions right than wrong, then it's hard to argue against that. One thing I've been pleased to see so far, because VAR really has been around for like this is the third season now. It was tried in the FA Cup and obviously the Champions League. I'm glad that so far, that certainly in the Premier League version of it, I haven't seen the referees going over to check it on a screen. To me, the big, I'm against it. If it was up to me, we wouldn't have it. Goal line technology is enough. But if it's going to come in, you've got to trust the fellas up in the studio to make the decision. Yeah. This whole business of taking 2 or 3 minutes to make it, to look at it, and then get the ref to go over and look at the screen, that's an absolute nonsense. And I'm glad that whoever the powers that be seem to have knocked that on the head. They're all qualified trained referees. If there has to be this interference, then the fellas up in the studio make the call and say, get on the blower to him and say, look, bum bum bum, this is what it should be. As regards the specific incident itself, it seems like the issue really is actually to do with the new handball rule rather than VAR. You can argue till the cows come home, but what they've said is that if the ball ends up in the net, having touched someone's hand, however accidental, it's ruled out. Now that really is a handball issue rather than a VAR issue, obviously, and it's unfortunate really because at a time when people are still very much getting used to VAR and trying to decide is this good or bad, incidents like that kind of paint VAR in an even worse light, when in actual fact in this specific instance it wasn't really VAR's fault. So it'll give us all a good laugh on Saturday tea time.
Well, I was going to say we stopped for some petrol because we'd not long left the stadium, and as I'm just getting out the car to put the petrol in, someone in the back goes, City have scored 3-2. So I went out, put the petrol in, came back in, sat down, so it's finished. He went, 2-2. I was like, hey, how did that happen? Then they explained it. But as I say, when I saw it at the time, when I saw it finally, I was like, well, it's clearly handball. It's his hand. That's the rule. It wasn't like there was no controversy in that sense. But I know I'm not a fan.
Like, I don't know who the Tottenham player next to Laporte was, but basically they're both kind of like jockeying for a header. The ball kind of dips down.
I know he doesn't mean it, does it? Yeah.
Now, if that flicks the Tottenham player and hits his hand in the same inadvertent way,
it's not a penalty.
It's not a penalty, and that seems unfair somehow, doesn't it?
But then otherwise, we get penalties for everything. Which I was going to make the point. I thought by this time of the season we'd have had 1 million penalties, and we haven't. And we've actually probably got fewer penalties than I was expecting. Is it stopping defenders from like going in for certain challenges? There's no tussling at the box, in for corners and set pieces. Are we going to see more headers? Liverpool scored one against Norwich when Van Dijk was completely left, unmarked. And so is that just they're going to go, well, there's no point even trying to mark him because he's so tall, and if I'll just end up standing in the way of him and it's going to be a penalty? I don't know. Maybe that's something that maybe all the defenders are just thinking, I'm not going anywhere near anybody at the moment, and then after a few weeks they'll go, I'm going to see whether I can get away. Oh no, I can't. I can see whether I can get away with this, that, and the other. Or maybe I'm just thinking too much about it.
Well, we'll see. We'll see how it settles. It's certainly not done City any favours so far, but it will be Liverpool's turn at some point, as the lads have said. Final word then on Mr. Coutinho. Doyle, we'll start with you. He's completed his much touted loan move to Bayern Munich, an €8.5 million deal, which will see him head over to Germany for the season. And then there's a set fee of, I think, €120 million next summer if Bayern want to make it permanent. So is this proof that his stint in Spain was a failure and Liverpool got a great deal?
First thing, he left, was it now 20 months ago? 20 months ago?
Yeah,
getting towards that? Yeah, 19, 20 months ago. And yet still so many Liverpool fans are just... Fans, that is, not journalists, are obsessed with him. And I don't buy into this thing about, look at Coutinho, look at Emre Can, for example, who looks like he may be surplus to requirements at Juventus. Not because he actually is surplus to requirements, but they tried to get rid of 2 of the midfielders and nobody wanted them. So it's like, we've got too many here, so let's see whether we can get rid of Can. Coutinho, was it a failure? Well, he's not been as good at Barcelona as he was at Liverpool because he wasn't playing in... towards the end, the same position. At Liverpool, he really came into form when he was moving to a central position. But there's this bloke called Messi who likes to play there for Barcelona. And, as much as I think Coutinho is good, I don't think he's quite as good as him. But what did he do the first season? He scored in a Copa del Rey final, which they won. He won the title, so he won 2 leagues in the end, and he got to a Champions League semi-final. And lost another Copa del Rey final. So in sense of when you write it down and have a look at what he's done in his time in 18 months at Barcelona, you go, well, that's quite good.
It's pretty decent.
But then £142 million, even at the time, you just thought, wow, how have Liverpool got that much money for that player? Because you knew then, even then you knew that Mane to a lesser extent, but Salah had been 6 months in, hadn't he, by that point?
Yeah.
And you thought, hang on, these
You
two,
had like 20
these
goals
two,
by then.
yeah, these two have really stepping up a bit. And Firmino by then is obviously becoming a key figure. So Liverpool got a good deal, but I'm not going to join in all this Coutinho bashing. He's got himself, okay, he may not have been a success at Barcelona as he thought he would be, or Barcelona certainly thought he was going to be. He's going to Bayern Munich. That's still one of the biggest clubs. Exactly, yeah, it's one of the biggest clubs in Europe where he'll play against opposition where he'll be way better than them. And if he gets back to form and Liverpool play Bayern Munich in the later stages of the Champions League this season, he'll be like one of the players they're going to have to stop because he'll be a completely different player to the one.
I'm massively up for it.
Yeah, I'm massively up for it because against Liverpool in both legs, the semi-final last year, he just looked like somebody who really did not want to be there. Now, whether that's because whether that's because he was playing against Liverpool or because of his situation at Barcelona, no matter who he would have been playing against. So, in that sense, Coutinho, yeah, I don't join in with all this. Haha, let's laugh at him. I think good luck to him at Bayern Munich. I think hopefully he'll do really well there. And if he play Liverpool, he doesn't do so well.
Do you wish him well, Dan? And do you expect him to do well?
I kind of feel a little bit Alan Partridge cheese meme. Like, good luck to the lad. Yeah, up to a point. I didn't boo him when he came back to Anfield in May. I wouldn't boo him again. It did leave a little bit of a bitter taste the way that he left. But as has so often been the case over the years, Torres, Owen, teams that have players that have left us in maybe slightly unsavoury circumstances, it hasn't really played out that well for them. So just this morning, I think on Sky, a graphic came up with his numbers at Barcelona, and they actually weren't that bad. Goals-wise, it was something like 20 and 80. I think it was a little bit better than.
That's better than he had at Liverpool, wasn't it?
And he had a reasonable number of assists. Now, you can prove anything with numbers, and obviously the perception, and certainly, it didn't. The games that I saw, he did look a bit like a little boy lost, and the odd flick, the odd goal, the odd good passage of play here and there didn't really make up for the fact that this dream scenario of him playing with Luis Suarez, who I remember when he arrived at Anfield, I remember a game away at Wigan where we won 4-0 on a Saturday tea time in that first season, and those two really seemed to be linking up very well. And I remember, I always got the impression that Suarez going there was one of the big appeals for him to go and kind of rekindle that relationship they had together when they were playing at Liverpool. Just didn't really seem to work out for him there. But like Doyle said, he's not exactly ended up having to go and play for Bromsgrove Rovers or someone. No disrespect to Bromsgrove. Does
it exist? Is it Bromsgrove Rovers Athletic? I don't know. Is it?
I don't know. He's and as again to reiterate what Doyle said, should our paths cross again and he finds himself up against Liverpool and he does get his career back on track, I'm sure he would take great delight in sticking it to us. So we'll keep an eye out for him and see how well he does. But there probably will be some Liverpool fans that are very disappointed that he hasn't come back. To Liverpool. And if one or two, as the season goes on, and one or two of the front players get injured, they'll be going, "I told you so. I told you we should have bought him." It's easy to be wise after the event, but I certainly am not one of them. We've got some brilliant players who proved again on Saturday what they can do for us. So. A reasonably warm good luck, Phil, but I'm far more interested in what our players are doing, to be honest.
Absolutely. Well, on that positive note, we will leave it there for today's Blood Red, and we'll be back at the end of the week where we'll be looking ahead to that Arsenal game, the big test for the Reds, and whatever VAR has got for us this weekend. Thank you for listening.